a little. Let's do a little prayer to start the day going. Chocolate, how delicious. Yeah, here we go. This one up there. So we keep it very simple. I love prayers and pujas and all these things and Sanskrit and bells and Tibetan, but sometimes it's really helpful just to remind ourselves it's just about our mind. It's about our mind and thoughts. Prayers are just thoughts. And for the Buddha, every thought counts. Every thought stays in the mind and produces a result. So think of it in a simple way like that, keeps us very grounded. So what we're doing is we're starting this little prayer. The first two lines are for those of us who already kind of figured we are Buddhists, who identify with that. So it's reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, thinking like that. And the second two lines is stating, well, the Lamas always say, state your motivation. I think we might say state your purpose. Why are we here together? What's the purpose of this? Why are we here together today? Well, it's to listen to these words, and I'm going to be listening too, I promise, coming from the Buddha, about the way we create our actions, actually the way we produce ourselves. This is the meaning of karma, how we create it and how we can fix things, because there's nothing set in stone. So we're going to do this action so we can take some advice from it. It's all advice. Every word, it should be advice. If it's not, it's just intellectual nonsense. It's got to be advice. It's got to be personal, experiential. But of course, we don't have to take the advice. That's our decision, but it is given as advice. And advice for what? Well, two things, really. A bird needs two wings. The wisdom wing, which is all the nuts and bolts of putting ourselves together, and today's practice is about that, putting ourselves together, helping develop our own amazing potential. So that on the other hand, we can develop the compassion wing, which is the ability to help others do the same. So the more sort of the long term is this one of, wanting to benefit others. We all live in this crazy world together. But you've got to put the wisdom wing together. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion, which is the point, is not enough. It's got to be informed by wisdom. So thinking this way. So even I always joke, and I mean it, even if you can be a 1% Buddhist, even if 1% makes sense, put it into practice. That's fantastic, That's the meaning of these two verses, these one verse. So we just say it in Tibetan, you listen, or you can read the words in English to yourself as you wish. Sangye charan soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charan soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charan soke chognam Jangshu Badu Dagni Gyapsuchi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupashok. Actually, the Tibetan style is that when the Umze, the chant leader, please meet George, our newly appointed chant leader, the Umze in Tibetan. Usually you start more formally. I'd go like this. I'd go, oh, Sangye. You'd got a little into it, but I didn't. I just went in bluntly. I'm sure George will do it a nice before you do it. Probably to warn you that it's coming, alert. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? People now, that's good. We're going to do this little practice, but it's good to talk about it first, to unpack it. Just to understand clearly what we're doing. So pure. So this, it's the concept here of this practice is called purification. So what's that? I mean, it's not a term we might use in our own lives, except when it comes to, say, going on a fast. You're purifying. We might talk about it like that, but you don't go to your therapist and say, "Please give me a purification practice." You wouldn't say that. So what do we mean by it? Because I think our biggest problem is as soon as we hear something is religious, we kind of lose the plot a little bit. We kind of go into the sky, So I think so important. All of these practices are to keep them on the earth. So extremely important to do that, which means, you know, being experiential, which means being psychological. Because Buddha's expertise is the mind. This is not a joke. This is actually literally true. We're so familiar with the Buddhist, the religious philosophical view of, as soon as we say religious philosophy, we assume some special part of us called a soul or a spirit. Like the Greeks call it an essence. The Hindus call it an atman, a self. There's this extra special little piece, more than body and more than mind. Well, Buddha asserts body and mind, and that's it. But what he's not saying is, but what he's saying is something more subtle. The mind for the Buddha is something more subtle, far more subtle than we would tend to think. It's not just describing the contents of our brain, the grosser level of our brain, In fact, the whole Buddha's, the entire point of being a Buddhist, if you've got the Mahayana view, if you take this word Buddha, I really like to remind ourselves of this, The etymology of that word is so delicious. The end result, Buddha would say, the Mahayana point of view, the Buddha would say that the end result that every one of us has the natural potential to accomplish, it is our natural potential, necessarily, if you being a mind possessor, a semchen, a sentient being, and the Buddha would suggest there are trillions of them, not just a few 7 billion humans, not just the animals, but trillions more. You're a semchen. You're a mind possessor. You have the potential naturally to become a Buddha. So the etymology of this word is so simple, so delicious. Bud, and I think similar, the Tibetan equivalent, Sangye, the first syllable implies the utter eradication from our mind, from our subjective cognitive process itself. We're not discussing the brain here. The subjective cognitive process itself, the utter eradication from that mind, from our very being, of all neuroses, all ego, all sense of separate self, all fears, all the dramas, the stuff that we are utterly familiar with. Attachment, anger, fears, jealousy, low self-esteem, these simple words. The Buddha has found from his own direct experience that these are not at the core of our being. I mean, these words are so simple, but they are utterly mind-boggling, We really should be astonished by it. But initially, we're shocked by it. I remember one woman in a class, and it's really understandable, she burst out laughing. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "What are you talking about?" Because as soon as we hear that you can accomplish the eradication of all anger, all fears, all jealousy, all depression, all anxiety, you can't even imagine being a proper human being. You sound completely insane. We just don't even accept it. Because in our culture, our models of the mind, we give equal status to those along with the other stuff, which we do like, love, compassion, kindness, generosity, and the da, Buddha, da implies the development to perfection of them, because they are at the core of our being, speaking simply. But in our culture, we give equal status to anger, jealousy, love, compassion, wisdom. We hope for a little bit more of the second lot, it's true. But there's no concept, there's no view, there's no goal, there's no methodology, there's no view in modern psychology or neuroscience that would even remotely suggest you can utterly rid yourself of all the neuroses. That sounds like mental illness. So of course we hear it in Buddhism, we put it in religious category, and so we go, oh, la-di-da, it's mystical. But this is Buddha's view of the mind. He doesn't deal with anything else except the mind. Well, he deals with the external world. What I mean is internally, there is the mind. So if this is the mind, and this is the potential of our mind, we better know what he means by the mind, because it's not the way we talk about it. Absolutely, for sure. Whereas reminding what we're talking about from Buddha's perspective is that, as I said, this non-physical, subjective, internal cognitive process itself, from the grossest level of thoughts and sensory consciousness to the most subtle level of the mental consciousness, way beyond the gross conceptuality and way beyond the senses, which we do not even posit as existing in modern psychology. This is a fact, And this level of mind is discovered by the genius Indians well before the Buddha. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama tells us, these genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago, who are the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And the literature on this is mind-boggling. I think modern people, modern scientists, will be completely blissed out to study it. It's incredibly sophisticated, incredibly detailed. And this knowledge, though, shockingly, doesn't come from putting a microscope on the brain. It's from the internal microscope of your own mind, on your own mind, to these subtle, at these subtle levels. So it's quite astonishing, actually, quite remarkable, you know. But of course, to be interested to study this model of the mind, you've got to even be open to the possibility that you're not describing the brain, you know. But this is Buddha's analysis, this is Buddha's view. So he's saying this is what our potential is. Now, straight away, if this is true, if we have the potential to be rid of all the rubbish and full of all the goodness, it's obvious from day one, every single technique in Buddhism has to lead you to that. It's pretty clear. If you decide you want to discuss, you know, achieve E equals MC squared, you start at 1 + 1 is 2. And everything you do all the way is leading you to that result, logically, you know. The first hammer you pick up and put the first nail into the first piece of that 100-story building has to lead you to the 100-story building. It can't wander off and turn into a sort of a 5-story something else. Everything has to be logical and orderly. The same here, exactly. So to hear the end result first is very encouraging. As nutty as it sounds to us, as abstract as it sounds. So this is where we get to purification. So one way of putting it very simply, if we take the Buddhist model of the mind, we've got 3 categories of states of mind: the neurotic, unhappy, deluded, I-based, fear-based, you know, deeply disturbing, distracting, distressing, delusional states of mind that he has found are not at the core of our being and can be removed. Why? Because they cause you suffering, baby. So that's the job there. If you like, the approach to this one is we've got to purify those, which means they're like, if you think of the weeds, we've got to pull out the weeds. That's purification. Practices that specifically focus on loosening these, you know. And then you've got the other ones, growing the positive ones, the flowers and the herbs, very simply. Developing the positive ones. Another way of putting it, if you're going to read Buddhist teachings, you're going to repeatedly come up with this concept. We have to learn to distinguish between what is to be abandoned, or to say, if you like, purified, gotten rid of, and what is to be practiced. That is to say, what is to be grown and developed. This is a constant theme throughout the entire Buddhist view, which is all leading us to this eradication of delusions and development of goodness to perfection, which is the purification practice. And the other one they call it, and we know this phrase, very religious sounding, the job of growing the flowers and the herbs, the job of enhancing the positive ones, that's called creating merit. So you have purification and creating merit. We hear these terms repeatedly if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you know. But again, remember, we are dealing with the mind. There's not another component called spiritual that's separate from your mind in Buddhism. There's no such thing. There's no such thing, you know. But because we're talking here in sort of 14th century, 10th century language, I mean, this is something really important to hear. You know, when I heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche first teaching, whenever it was, doesn't matter. He'd been out of Tibet maybe a few years, you know, not that long. It was in the 70s, and he came out in the early 60s. So until then, the Tibetans were left alone, comfortably in their own country. A few Westerners climbed up the mountain and went down and tried to sell them Christianity and a few things, but the Tibetans didn't want it, so they left again. They were left on their own, really, Tibetans. And really, in 1959, when they were studying in those monasteries, they were studying using the language that was created in the 7th century, especially for Buddhist philosophy. They have a language that's unique to Buddhist philosophy. They have honorific language, they have regular worldly language, and they have religious language. So they were still speaking that language. It's like we're all talking like Chaucer, you know? That's how they talked. That's how they talked. So when Lama Zopa was teaching, he talked like that. So the frameworks, the concepts, the way, all the implications, the whole approach, the whole package was like literally could have been 7th century, because they would have spoken in the same way. Now that's shocking to us, you know. That's why someone like Lama Yeshe, who came along with Lama Zopa, we met them first, when they came to the West in the 70s for the first time, met Westerners in the early 70s. Lama Yeshe, for some reason, had this astonishing ability, and I see it more and more now when I have to edit their books. I always joke and think that Lama Yeshe was really a hippie, but pretended to be a Tibetan, because he had this chaotic English. They both so kindly learned English from the day one, you know. Lama Zopa said when he came out of Tibet and he started memorizing the dictionary, because Tibetans learn to memorize. So and memorizing in Time magazine, that's right, in Time magazine, memorizing Time magazine, try and learn English. But Lama Yeshe somehow meeting his first Western students, because their skill, because the Buddhist skill is the mind, their mind. They've sorted out their mind, you know, using Buddha's analysis. then they can, you know, with that clarity, with that wisdom, internal wisdom, from seeing their own mind directly, not looking at a brain, they have this extraordinary ability to see the minds of others, which is what it's going to give you, you know. And so Lama somehow could just intuited the way modern Western people talk. They were all these hippies who went to Kathmandu in the 70s. He intuited how they talk, so he talked like them. He was able to somehow, because it's experiential for him, was intellectual, he was able to frame it in these modern psychological terms, you know. I know when I first met Lama Zopa, I didn't understand a word he said. I trusted he knew what he was talking about, but it was so arcane. I couldn't get my head around the packaging, the concepts, the framework. I kept saying to myself, where's the Buddhism here, you know? Then Lama Yeshe would come along and give a talk at night. And I'd sigh with relief. Suddenly, he would put it in experiential terms, you know, simple experiential terms. And that's how he always taught, which is what's so powerful for us. What's what we need to hear, you know. So to hear these practices in this way, for me, is so beneficial, you know. Of course, when we develop a Tibetan Buddhist practice and we use our bells and dorjis and sing Sanskrit and Tibetan and all the rest, we have some sense of the meaning of it. It's still easy to lose the plot and start getting all holy and I'm a Buddhist yogi ringing my bell. But it's so important not to lose the plot and to realize what we're doing is working with our own human mind. If there's a single practice in Buddhism, if there's a single theory, a single word, a single method that doesn't help you lessen your delusions and grow your goodness, it is a load of rubbish and kindly throw it in the bin. And this is not a joke. It's deadly serious. It's the same as if you're going to head to E equals MC squared. Everything you learn on the way has to lead you to that. If you wander off in another direction, you've learned the wrong thing. Everything has to be organic and logical and incremental, leading to the result. So everything in Buddhism has to lead you to the removal of the neuroses from your mind and the growing of the goodness and wisdom. That really is the essence of being a Buddhist. So here we're talking about purification. Then we ask, well, what are we purifying? Well, we're purifying the neuroses. We're purifying the delusions, and also we're purifying, trying to weaken the. Buddha uses the analogy of seeds and fruits, you know, because the way the mind works for the Buddha is in the framework of this law of karma. Many people who are Buddhists don't much care about karma and think it's some extra boring thing that's added on top. But actually, you know, when we understand the Buddhist teachings about the mind and how to become this Buddha, how to stop suffering and get happiness, you know, it's all rooted, it's completely informed, or it's rooted in the view of the mind that Buddha has, which is the view of the world, which is based on this natural law called the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. I never know what the word means. I've heard it means action, but I've also heard it doesn't mean that, so I have no idea. But basically Buddha's view, what is found to be true, and again, this is the crucial point, it's not from revelation. He didn't make it up. He's not speculating. He didn't have a dream about it. It's not coming from a vision. It's coming from his own direct observation. That's why I was like, and I repeat it repeatedly, and I never get bored with this story. One time in New Zealand, this man who happened to be a scientist asked the question, and I always say this because I've never had the question before or since. It was really brilliant. He said, who revealed these teachings to the Buddha? So this is utterly perfect if you take the usual view of religion, which is a philosophy that asserts a creator, a boss, God, because that is revelation. The teachings have to come from God, and they can't come from your own experience. You can't prove God is right. That means you become God, and you can't say that. Not possible, not possible. So the usual view we have of religion is it's a belief, because you can't prove it, therefore must be believed, and I'm not complaining about that. If you've got total faith in a creator who ran the universe and runs the universe and made the rules and has to be obeyed, and you'll get who punishes and rewards, nothing wrong. Go for it. But that's just not Buddha's view, that's all. So when he said, who revealed these teachings to the Buddha, I asked him, I said, well, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? And of course, we all laughed, because we wouldn't. And this is the crucial point. It's just, I can't stress this enough. We need it stressed because we're so addicted to this concept of religion being mystical, beyond, therefore to be believed, can't be proven, and therefore la-di-da, and therefore we think we can make up whatever we like, you know. I mean, it's unbelievably irresponsible. People go, people go to a weekend course, have a vision in their meditation, write a bloody book. Excuse me. It's so rude. I mean, it's so unbelievably rude. We can't believe it. But we think it's okay because we don't think you can prove it, because we're allowed to believe what we like. We speak like that, But it's not a joke to say that the rigor and clarity and depth of analysis that we know you need to use just to make a decent cake is exactly what we must use to discover the reality of truth, the reality of the mind, and everything else, which is Buddha's expertise, This is not kidding. So when I said, in other words, Einstein, what is he? He's a person who uses intelligence, who observed the world, okay? He observed what was in front of him. He didn't look at the sky and have a vision. He observed what's there. And he, used his intelligence to observe what's there. He didn't make up what's there. He didn't make up E equals MC squared. He didn't make up relativity. He observed things, or like a botanist doesn't make up botany. They observe growing things and then articulate it and then present it as a law. There's nothing made up. They don't own botany. They don't own copyright. They didn't make it up. It's a crucial point. People who invented math, whoever that fellow was back then, who did the counts, the number 1 to 10, that business, or 1 to 9 or whatever. They didn't make it up. They just articulated what was already there. So there's always been 7 oranges there since 49 eons. But somebody decided to label it 1 to 9, That's simply labeling what's there. Well, that's Buddha. But his observation of the reality of the world is far more subtle, because it's including the subtle levels of cognition that we don't posit as existing in the modern scientific world. Now they're learning about it with respect from hearing all these genius, coming from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, talking to all the genius, thinkers in the world, now begin to appreciate this unbelievable level of knowledge coming from India from more than 3,000 years ago. Now beginning to appreciate, So it's quite astonishing, really, where this knowledge comes from. The mind, here, internal, the mind. So Buddha is describing that what he's observed to be true is that there are trillions of consciousnesses, mind possessors, and that they're driven by this natural law called the law of karma, which simply means that everything any mind thinks and then does and says, if you're embodied, whatever we think and do and say, that is the very process itself. That is the key process, the main process that produces the person we become. Now we know that when you become a cook, we know that whatever goes on in your mind in relation to cooking, and then what you do with your body and your speech in relation to cooking, is the main process that produces the cook you become. That's called science. Well, this is the Buddha's, but it's about being a happy person and a suffering person. That's what his expertise is, how to become a happy person and stop being a suffering person, how to become a useful person and stop being a harmful person. That's Buddha's expertise, not cooking and carpentry. He probably might have been good at it. He's a clever fellow. But his expertise is how to stop suffering and get happiness. So he is saying, just like with cooking and carpentry, that what goes on in the mind, and therefore what you do with your body and speech on the basis of it, that's the process that produces the person you become. That's the process that produces an insane, suffering, crazy person or a happy, wise Buddha person. That's it. That's it. But that's a shock to us. That is a big shock to us, because we think it's everything out there. As Lama Zopa says, and it's so hard to believe it's true, it's shocking, but listen to it. I mean, these are the words he said. The vast majority of all humans on the planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind, and I'm adding here in brackets, in relation to their happiness and suffering, that what goes on in their mind in relation to their happiness and suffering, that they have no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all. This is very shocking, but hear it. It's fact. Why? Because from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, where are we focused on? The outside. Why? Because that's where happiness is and that's where suffering is. So we spend our lives trying to get the nice things that we believe will give us happiness and avoid the ugly things that will cause us suffering. That's all the outside. We are totally focused on that. We don't. Not only do we not know that what goes on in our mind plays any role at all, we don't even know what does go on in our mind. And this is what Buddha's expertise. This is what Buddha's giving us. a brilliant skill, you know, to learn to know your mind intimately, to levels of subtlety that we can't even imagine. And it's not being mystical. In order to eradicate the pain and suffering that is, and what causes us suffering and what causes us to harm others, and to develop to perfection our unbelievable goodness and clarity and wisdom. This is essentially what Buddha's on about, you know. I mean, it sounds delicious to me. I'm really looking forward to it, enjoying the process. So if there is anything, you know, the commonest thing we have, especially with Tibetan Buddhists, I mean, I was a Catholic. Well, Tibetan Buddhists leave the Catholics for dead when it comes to rituals and, you know, stuff. Hell. But if there's anything, any single practice you do, ringing a bell, prostrating, wearing these funny 14th century robes, whatever it might be, you know, that doesn't help you rid the mind of the rubbish and grow the goodness. And it is a load of rubbish. It is superstition. Then throw it out and don't do it. That's a fact. That's a fact. So when we know that, we can do things with much courage and confidence and choose the practices we do, you know. Okay, so Buddha's telling us that what goes on in our mind is the main player in my happiness and suffering. That's it. Short term and long term. Very simple. As shocking as it is. He's also saying that there's nothing in the mind. Okay, so the other way he's talking, which is very simple, very clear, it's like with music and carpentry. Karma really is one way of describing the process of creating karma. It's a process of programming yourself. It's a process of learning something. So you know, when you study cooking, you learn the theories. You don't have to, you know, you learn them until they become intuitive. You learn carpentry to become second nature. Well, that's all we're trying to do here. We're trying to unlearn, undo, get rid of, purify, lessen neurotic habits, you know, and grow, develop the positive ones. That's the process of being a Buddhist, really. Of course, it takes time, because he's saying, you know, we come from past lives totally programmed with whatever's in our mind from the first second of conception. We come into this life programmed with our own tendencies. This is the crucial point to remember. They don't come from mummy and daddy. They're not a function of the brain. More and more people now in the world are discovering this. When I worked on Lama Zopa's book about death, How to Face Death Without Fear, published by Wisdom, I remember reading at the time, during that process, I read a book by an American medical journalist called Nick Teresi. He's a very funny fellow. His expertise was death. People always said that they thought he should be depressed, but he wasn't. He was very funny and kind of a delightful man. And he wrote this book called The Undead. It's not about zombies. It's all about the contradictions and obstacles and problems in the American medical system now. This is a few years ago, in relation to the whole process of cutting out organs, you know, at the time of death. Because now there's all these contradictions now. People are not now clear about when the hell death comes, death happens. I mean, one of the classic examples is we all know in countless cultures, so many cultures for centuries, there's always talk about people who come back to life, quote unquote. Well, from the materialist view, it's too complicated. So you put it in the too hard basket, isn't it? We can't cope with that. Don't know what to do with that. But it's a big problem now when you're ready to cut some boy's liver out and the damn man starts breathing again. It's most inconvenient. And I'm not being sarcastic. He was quite cynical about the business, by the way. All the elitist people, arrogant, you know, bossing people around, forcing. I mean, even the law now in Europe, many European countries, there's now the default is that they take your organs. You've got to give permission to not take your organs, you know. Whatever, never mind. He was a very interesting man. But one doctor, he had a whole chapter on what people call out-of-body experiences during their operations, which of course the medical profession pay no attention to, just think it's a load of rubbish. But he had one woman, he joked about this one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to sort of stop all her organs. And from their perspective, there's no way on the planet she could have any awareness. But she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience, quoting exactly what the doctors said, the instruments they used, the music they played, the jokes they cracked. They could not argue. You can't argue with that, you know. So this doctor in this business, the author quoted him as saying, "I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but I can say that much." So I think this is really good. People are questioning now, you know, and it's especially what this Holiness is doing, working with all the modern thinkers, you know, looking into these things, questioning, which is great. I think it's fantastic. So anyway, Buddha's view is very clearly this one. Your consciousness is not physical. It comes from the past. And this is the thing about karma. Every millisecond of what you think and do and say programs it. He would have liked that concept, Buddha, I'd say. He says sow seeds in there. But programs is so one of the key ways that karma ripens, there are four, is whatever is in your mind is a tendency. It's a habit. It's there because you put it in there. It's there because you've practiced it. If you can, play the piano now, and I see you play piano, I can deduce you must have practiced for years. It's not surprising. Well, if you're really angry now, I can deduce that you must have practiced anger. But we don't think that in the West. We think, oh, I'm angry because my father hurt me. We don't take responsibility. We think it's my father's fault. But it's a habit, dear. In the same way that, if you're kind, it's a habit. And this is the key point in Buddhism, that what goes on in our mind stays in our mind. So you come into this life programmed with your tendencies, whether you're a psychopath or a saint. They're your tendencies. This alone, for us in our modern culture, with our views that are just kind of implicit for us, of science, neuroscience, etc. This is a massive point to think about. And even most Buddhists, we don't think about it. We still assume, oh, I'm angry because my father hurt me. I'm angry because my wife was mean to me. It's very default assumption. We really have to think about this one. It brings a tremendous shift in your mind when you can learn to own responsibility. Simply to own what's in your own mind. Yes, your husband's a creep. Yes, your father was mean. No argument. But that's their problem. What's mine? That's the point. And so this idea of karma isn't just some interesting philosophical thing you could chuck on top. It's absolutely fundamental to your whole approach of Buddhist practice. Because the essence in the Buddhist approach is that you can change your mind, because your mind is yours. It does not come from a creator. It does not come from your mother and father. It is not a function of the brain. It's dependent upon your mother, father, dependent upon your brain. There's no question. But this is a powerful concept that comes from taking the view of karma on board, You begin to own what's in your own mind. And this is the starting point. This is massive. Huge, actually. And from the long-term perspective, because cause and effect is the first example, an example of the first level of dependent arising to prove emptiness, which we learn about at the end of the practice, this is already loosening the grip of ego grasping. It's profound, It's time to own your own thoughts, own your own tendencies, not with guilt, not with neurosis, not with shame, I'm a bad person, but with ownership and courage. It loosens the grip of ego grasping. It loosens the grip of self-pity. It loosens the grip of attachment and anger. We can own our own thoughts. But this is a tremendous shift that has to happen. And this is the essence of being a Buddhist. As long as we start being a Buddhist, when we start working on our mind, Huge, huge. So this is one of the implications of karma. Because Buddha's view basically is there are trillions of mind possessors. Their consciousnesses, not coming from a creator, not coming from mummy and daddy, not a function of the brain, and not coming out of nothing. There's no such thing that come out of nothing. There's no such thing that doesn't have a cause. And of course, you can't have a first cause. I mean, the Christians spend a lot of time, nothing wrong, positing the possibility that there can be a first cause, which of course they call God. For Buddha, that's not viable. So from the Buddhist perspective, the conclusion has to be that your mind is beginningless, as mad as that sounds to us. And indeed, the Mahayana view says it's endless. And this consciousness of ours, this continuity of mental moments, is driven by this natural law such that everything we think and do and say programs it. That's it, or as Buddha would use, sow seeds in the mind. So seeds, by definition, bring fruits. So basically our actions, karma, everything we think and do and say every millisecond is an action. Each one drops a seed into our mind and basically will ripen in the future in 4 different ways, and any of 4 ways. One is a type of rebirth. One is a tendency in the mind of that rebirth. Third is your experiences at the hands of others, how you're seen and treated by others. And fourth is the way the very physical world itself impacts upon you. This is how they talk. So if you think of your life, look at yourself today. 1, you have a body that comes from past actions. 2, you have a mind in that body. Well, what's in there, your tendencies, they're your habits that you brought with you. 3, you're seen and treated by others in a certain way. and think about it, since you're born until now, you either have had people be nice to you, love you, treat you well, give you things, trust your words, or the opposite. Or then they change roles, it's pretty clear. And fourth, the very physical world, the way it impacts upon us. So every action we do, everything that we do with our body, speech, and mind brings any or all of these four results, at different times. It's highly complex. It's technical, basically, So, and again, the crucial point that I always have to stress, we all need to remember it, because we're so addicted to the view of religion coming from a creator, that we're made by somebody else. And as I always quote my Jesuit priest friend, when I asked him, what is a sin by definition, he said something is wrong because God said. As we all know, if you're a good Christian or Muslim, if you go against the will of God, that's what defines something as immoral or wrong. That's massive in our minds. So even if we're materialists, we believe that. God said this, mummy said this, daddy said this, the judge said that. We're living in terms of what people have said we should and shouldn't do. And that's why if no one sees us do anything naughty, we go, oh, phew, I got away with it. For the Buddha, that's like going to your doctor. And this is really the powerful point where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. Even though they have a view of karma, they still have a view of there's an inherent intrinsic energy called God and an intrinsic energy called I. Buddha went, no, don't need the extra components. You don't need a creator. We don't need to have someone running the show. We don't need a little I in here running the show. That's the key point at which he diverged, the teachings about emptiness, basically. So this is where he got to the non-dualistic point. The dualistic view of a creator and a self implies this one of me and others, God and me, bad and good, all the other things we have, and the punishment and reward. No such view, but we hear it like that. If a materialist, we hear it that way. Mummy will punish me, the judge will punish me, police will punish me, I'm a bad girl. We all have that view intrinsically, instinctively. Don't blame your Jewish mother or your Catholic mother. It's deep inside us, But the Buddha says, no, it's no need. There's no such thing as a punisher or a rewarder. It's a joke. So when you ask Buddha, why is killing wrong? You ask Jesus, he says, because God said. My Catholic priest friend said there is some aspect of natural law that makes it wrong, meaning it hurts others and they don't like it. But the main thing that makes it wrong, and I think it's a tremendously important point, because this is what we tend to think of religion. It's wrong because God said. And that's fine if you live that way. Perfect. But here, Buddha, why is killing wrong? He says, guess what, folks? It's because people don't like being hurt. It's a natural law. It's a natural law. It's a natural law. This is a massive point for the Buddha. He's describing a natural law. So that means there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. In botany, it's a natural law. There's no Mr. Botany running the show. Botany doesn't go to sleep until Mr. Botany wakes up in the morning and starts it going again. No one runs botany. It's a natural law that clever people have identified. Well, karma's the same. Whatever we think and do and say just naturally brings its own results. So how do we define all that then? Well, for the Buddhists, it's deceptively simple. You've got negative actions, positive actions, and ones that they say are neither. Well, let's forget those. Look at the positive and negative. And the negative ones are an action we do with our body and speech that's driven by a delusion, driven by a neurosis, driven by the voice of ego, driven by attachment, anger, jealousy. We all know these. Not complicated. That will sow seeds in the mind that will ripen in the future as a suffering type of body, as tendencies to keep doing it. That happening to you, and the physical environment will be even the physical environment is impacted by our mind. There's a whole, especially the Vajrayana describes how this can be. It's a natural law, not punishment, not reward, but it's very hard to hear this. And that everything is labeled a virtuous action, which is an action we do with our body and speech that's driven by a positive state of mind, like non-attachment, non-anger, love, compassion, kindness. Necessarily ripens in 4 different ways. For example, a human body, as opposed to a dog body or an ant body, is the fruit of a virtuous action. The tendencies in the mind will be virtuous, will be the tendency to do that virtuous action. You'll have those virtuous things happen to you, and the physical environment will nourish you. And so, for example, killing, one example of non-killing, one example of an action called non-killing. An intentional decision to refrain from killing. And when you do that action, for it to be a complete action, there have to be 4 things in place when you do it. There has to be a living being, a mouse, for example. 2, your mind involved in it, which is the main part. There has to be an intention, I will not kill that mouse. And then there has to be a motivation, a virtuous motivation, such as compassion. 3, you do the action. 4, the result, a happy mouse. Thank you, Robina, bye. That's a complete action of non-killing. So to be a complete action, that's one that will bring a type of rebirth. A human body is the fruit of a karmic action of non-killing that drops a seed into your non-killing karmic bank vault. And at the time of our death, before we even stop breathing, in our case, in our past life, not more than a few weeks before we found our way to our mother's fallopian tube, while she was there with our daddy, or in the Petri dish these days, one of our virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing was triggered before we even stopped breathing, which already programmed us, even before we stopped breathing in the past life, not more than a few weeks before this present conception. That was triggered. Second, the karmic seeds that produce our tendencies in the mind, good and bad, they were all triggered. Third, all the karmic seeds were triggered that would then produce our experiences at the hands of others. And 4, all the karmic seeds that produce the way the physical world impacts upon us. Were all triggered, really programmed before you even stop breathing. So here we are, our mind went to our mother's human womb. We've got this human body, we've got these tendencies, we have the experiences in our life up to now, how we're seen and treated by others, and the way the very physical world impacts upon us. So non-killing, a complete action of non-killing, is the main cause of getting this rebirth, human. And if we practice it in the context of living in vows, which I want to talk about today before we finish, vows are so potent psychologically. Without a vow, the only time you create a karmic action of non-killing and drop a rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seed in your bank vault, ready to be triggered at the time of your death, and you need plenty of those. The only time you create one of those without a vow is when you meet the mouse, have the intention and the motivation, and you do the action, and the mouse is saved. But how often in a day do we do that? Not. We're sitting here being nice people, aren't we? But if we don't have a vow not to kill, we're not creating any virtue of non-killing. And just to get a human body, you need non-killing karma. Just to wake up in a life to have no thought to kill, you need non-killing karma. Just to have an experience of not getting killed or dying young, you need the non-killing karma. And just to have a body that's fat and healthy and eat whatever you like and is not, harmed by the environment, you need to have non-killing, rich, delicious, non-killing karma. And the way to create that is by in the context of vows and purification. And this is the first level of practice. The 2 main tools we've got are living in vows and purification, So, trying to cover so many things here. All this is in the literature. It's all there. I'm just trying to summarize. And this is a natural law, Buddha's observation, not speculation, not invention. He's not running the show. He's not bossing. It's not punishment and not reward, which is the deep instinct we have, It's a natural law. It's a natural law. So the purification, so everything we think and do and say programs us. So that means proactively doing an action of killing, and then the action of proactively purifying that killing, because it's not set in stone. You can purify, you can eradicate, you can lessen and weaken any negative tendency. Of course you can. And you can strengthen and grow positive ones, or you can do the other way around. You can grow the negative and weaken the positive if you like. Don't want to do that. Because it's the mind. It's infinitely impermanent. There's nothing set in stone. We are not intrinsically bad. In fact, the Buddha's view, and this takes time to see because it doesn't seem logical to us. As I said, the so-called negative ones, the so-called non-virtuous ones, the painful ones, the neurotic ones, they're driven by these conceptual stories that are fundamentally mistaken. And then they're additions. They're not integral. They're not at the core of our being. They're additives, somehow like that, And they can be removed. This is Buddha's view. It's kind of intense. And there's logic to it. So that's why we learn, that's why it's so necessary to study the mind. The Buddha's view of the mind is so precise, So there's not a single tiny so-called negative, the voices of ego. They're restricted, painful, distressing, delusional. The key factor is they're delusional. and they're delusional, and they cause us to suffer, and then they cause us they cause the world to be misrepresented to us, and they cause us therefore to harm others. This is the suffering from the negative actions, the Buddha says, you know. So the purification practice it's got 4 steps. It's got 4 steps, 4 R's. The first one is regret. And this is a huge one. I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was asked one time, what's the difference between this meaning here that we've got called regret and what we tend to think of as guilt? He said, well, guilt is you look in the past and you say, I did this and I did that and I did this. And then you say, and I'm a bad person. That's the natural assumption. We all have this. We all have this. It's so clear. And if we analyze, this is me talking, not His Holiness now, if we unpack this, we're going to see that it's anger. Anger against whom? Yourself. You know, I'm a bad person. Well, when another person, you say, you did this and you did that and you're a bad person. That's all we're doing here with guilt. So where does that come from? Look at it, analyze it, unpack it, you know. It's coming from this deep assumption that somehow there's a whole set of rules out there that somehow someone's created. You know, it's either God or judge or police or mummy, and I'm trying to live up to those things. And as soon as I don't, I already have internalized God or Buddha, God or mummy or the judge, and said, oh, I did it wrong. I'm a bad person. But it's all based upon this kind of view. There's something out there, you know, that says you shouldn't do this. And when you do it, oh, I'm a bad person. It's very instinctive. We all have this. But this regret is so healthy. His Holiness said, the first part's the same. I did do this and I did do that. But then, and I'm adding this piece here too, he says, then you think, what can I do to fix it? But before that, we have the whole concept of regret, the emotional component of regret is really what we in the West would call self-compassion. It's like if you know that too much sugar, and I'm being a bit, I don't know enough about diabetes, let's just pretend too much sugar caused you to get diabetes, then you know you don't want diabetes. You do not want suffering. So as soon as you realize you ate that thing with too much sugar, guilt would be absurd. Oh, I'm a bad person. I ate sugar. I mean, as if sugar's going to punish you, you know, who cares? The real intelligent view is, oh my God, I ate sugar. I can't believe it. I regret having done that. Why, Robina? Because I don't want diabetes. And that drives you to the next second, which His Holiness says, what can I do to fix it? This is so intelligent. This is regret. And all rooted based upon this concept of what I think and I do and I say produces me. Nothing to do with being judged. So if I'm a Christian, yes, I will regret it because I went against God. And I'll beg Him to forgive me because forgiveness is what purifies me. Not for the Buddha. He's a very nice guy. He would forgive you. It's like going to your doctor. Listen, doctor, I ate too much sugar. Please forgive me and stop me getting cancer. She will laugh at you. Diabetes, whatever it is. Or, you know, you discover that cigarettes will cause cancer. Then she's told you this and you go home and you discover there's no doctor. Oh, and out come the Marlboros. I won't get cancer. She doesn't see me. That's our dualistic view of punishment and reward. That's our dualistic view of being caught, of being naughty and good, you know. I mean, it's infantile. When you realize you're producing yourself, who cares who sees you do anything? And this is really the hardest one for us. It's practically realizing emptiness being this way. This is what karma's rooted in. It's a natural law. You want flowers in your garden, you better learn botany. You don't want weeds, you better learn botany, not punishment and reward. And no one did it. This is why I love this concept of seeds and fruits, you know. I mean, you know, when you look in your garden, and you see the veggies there and the flowers, you don't go, oh, aren't I lucky? Who put flowers and veggies in my garden? Aren't I lucky? Like thank God or thank the universe, you know? No, how silly. Of course not. You know you put them there. You own them. And when you can own the good ones, you can own the weeds because you put them there too. Not who put weeds in my garden. Well, I love this analogy of seeds and fruits because your life is your garden. It's the best way to put it. Every tiny thing that arises in here is because you've done it before. Every tiny thing that happens to you, you've got karmic history with that person. It cannot be random by definition. It's a natural law. You have intense karma with that person who gives you $100 or takes you $100. The whole world out there is your karmic appearance, as Lama Zopa says. There's not a single thing every second that you didn't create. It's a really intense concept. And it's so dynamic, you know, and so much to do with owning everything rather than this feeling of being a victim. I didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault. We believe that philosophy more than anything. It's totally tragic. It's demented. It's you know, I'm an innocent victim. Nobody can be, there's no such thing. Which is not meant to be cruel, it's meant to be energizing. Because if we can own the good things, we can own the bad ones easily, you know. But the trouble is in Buddhism, you start with the bad ones, so we just think it's all punishment and reward. We can't hear it properly, you know. So every second we think and do and say things is programming my mind, sowing seeds in my mind. So if then, it says clear, if the actions that are labeled negative and positive, which of course we don't talk this way in modern psychology, it sounds very depressing, but we have to understand the meaning of this. Negative, not because somebody said so. Negative because it harms you and harms others. Positive because it helps you and helps others. It's pretty practical, you know. So if it is true that what's called negative programs my mind with seeds that will ripen as my suffering in terms of a body, tendencies, experiences, and environment, and I don't want suffering, and how do we, so even just keep it simple, forget nirvana, forget Buddhahood, forget bodhicitta, forget emptiness, you know, a human life. Suffering in a human life is having sickness. Suffering in a human life is people being mean to us. Suffering, you know, is having unhappy tendencies. We know this. We don't want those. Very clear. So what are the causes? You know, if you don't want to get killed, what are the causes of it? Past killing. So you stop killing. You want to be treated badly by others and who don't believe your words, even if you're telling the truth, and will stop lying. You don't want to be, you know, it's sort of simple. In a way, it's got some kind of psychological logic to it. The Buddha's very first instruction, his recommendation, his sort of, his recommendation for how to practice, how to act, sounds very similar to Jesus. It's a list of 10. So has Jesus got a list of 10. But the similarity, very similar, but the basis for the instruction, as I've been saying, is radically different. Jesus says, don't kill. Why, Jesus? Because God said. And you must ask God to forgive you, and that'll purify you. Nothing wrong. This is not Buddha's view, that's all. Buddha says don't kill. Why not Buddha? Because guess what, Robina? There's 2 points. There's 2 points here. One is it is a negative action because it harms others. But why he exhorts us not to do it is for our own sake first, because it'll harm you, Robina. I think in our culture, we find this one the hardest. We love to talk about compassion. Oh, don't kill because it harms others. But when we hear the Buddha says at the very beginning level of practice, there's no discussion of compassion in the wisdom wing. It's all about yourself. When he says don't kill, the main beneficiary is you. He's giving you advice to stop you from suffering. And that's hard for us to hear. We think that sounds selfish, you know. But this is the point. That's what renunciation means. You've got to be sick of suffering. You've got to not want future suffering. That's why that stops you from eating sugar, isn't it? You've got to not want cancer. That stops you from smoking. You've got to not want to be killed, harmed, lied to, stolen from, or have other suffering. That's what stops you from killing, lying, and stealing. It's for your benefit. You are the beneficiary. This is the first level of practice. And this is the level at which karma is taught first, you know. That takes a while for us, I think. We think it's selfish or something. Compassion comes eventually, of course it does. But first is like compassion for yourself. So, okay, everything we think and do and say sows seeds. Everything that's labeled negative ripens as future suffering. Everything that's positive ripens as happiness. It seems almost absurdly simple. And it is in theory, but the complexity of it is extraordinary. We think we've got like 1,000 thoughts a second. I mean, Western psychology says that. Buddha would agree. Yeah. So, okay. The key is the mind. But the very first level of practice in which this is where karma is taught, is not even about the mind, actually. Karma at first is all about body and speech. The vows are about behavior. Vows do not discuss the mind at all. Vows are all about controlling behavior. The first level of practice in the Lamb Rim is all about the body and speech, not about the mind yet. Beginning a little bit, but the essence is control the servants of your mind, control your, so that's why the little list of 10, similar to Jesus, don't kill, which means don't use your body driven by a delusion to harm others, don't lie, don't take the ungiven, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't badmouth. The 7 of the body and speech, you know, simple little instructions, recommendations, methods, medicine, you know, to protect you from future suffering, to protect you from future suffering. It's about behavior, not about the mind yet. And this is a tremendous level of practice. We don't think much is in our culture. But if you look at the world, what parts of us do the harm? It's our body and speech, isn't it? Okay, we might not run around killing and raping too many people in our lives, but look at our speech. I mean, to think of controlling our speech sounds silly. I can say what I like, we say. We're just vomiting out garbage much of the time. Not knowing what we're saying, uncontrolled, angry, criticizing, bad-mouthing behind backs, not speaking the truth. Most of us don't even know what we say, whether it's true or not. Just blur, blur, you know. Oh, I'm allowed to say what I like, we say, because we think it doesn't matter, which means we think it doesn't have consequences. Well, everything we think and do and say sows seeds. It's pretty clear. And then we can see in our lives, if one day you control your speech, you won't have problems that day, I promise. You know, so body and speech are tremendous. That's what does the harm. Look at the world. Of course, it's driven by the mind, but the very first level of practice in the Lamb Rim is about body and speech. Then you get to the next level, and now you start being a Buddhist. You work on your mind. You be your own therapist, as Mama Yeshe puts it, you know. So the purification practice, along with the vows, is all taught in the first scope of practice, the first level. So the purification practice, the first step, the 4 R's, the first one is called regret. Regret. So you acknowledge, well, I did do that, and I did kick the dog, and I did badmouth my girlfriend, and I did shout at my mother, and I did kill the dog, or whatever it might be. Whatever it is, and today is a good day to start. And then this life, that certain tendencies that you have, actions you've done, you know, like do the fishing or kill the baby, or like I killed a baby when I was 23. Called abortion, isn't it? That sentient being came to my womb. A human being, I always thought of her as a girl, I don't know if it was, came to my womb due to past karma. When she died a few weeks before that, the karmic seed to come to my fallopian tube, when I was in bed with that bloke, was already triggered. She's sitting there twiddling her thumbs. I jumped into bed and she came running. And I knew that second I was pregnant, and then the next thought was, I'm going to have an abortion. So strong karma between me and that person. Karma is very personal. We have intense history with each other. So that person came to my womb. She won the lottery by having a virtuous karmic seed be triggered to get a human body, but she'd created the other karma of experiences similar to the cause from another action of killing to get killed. So I got her killed. I had the abortion. I got the nurses and doctors to do it for me. So I always think of that one. I regret that one. What do I mean by that? Not that I could have done any better at the time. I didn't know any better. But I regret the fact, based on my ignorance, I didn't know what, I didn't recognize that I was killing a human being. So I regret having done that, because I don't want that seed to ripen as my getting killed, a lower realm rebirth, or me a tendency to get killed. I don't want that. Or sick body. I don't want that. So for my sake, I regret it. And then, of course, when you think of a few things of this life, then you think, and whatever I've done since the beginning of this time, if my mind goes back and back, I must have done billions of actions as animals, as humans, God knows what. And I regret whatever I have done with my body and speech to harm any sentient being ever. Because you know what, Robina? You're talking to yourself here. I do not want future suffering. This is the basis of the first level of practice, renunciation, and this is the basis of this first step called regret. You've got to be sick of suffering. You know yourself when you start going on a diet because you're fed up with being overweight, or you're sick of the cancer, or you're sick of the diabetes tendency, you're sick of the bad breathing. So you're sick of the suffering. That's got to be the energy that compels you to want to practice. And that's what they mean by renunciation. Not guilt, not I'm a bad person. You've got to be sick of suffering. And that drives us to then want to change. That's the first step, regret, because I don't want future suffering. And we know we don't. We're sick of anger. We're sick of depression. We're sick of anxiety, aren't we? We're sick of jealousy. We're sick of the dramas in our relationships. We're fed up with it. Not having guilt. It's got to energize us, you know. The second one is, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor who can give me the medicine that I can take to purify me? Because, you know, because here in this practice, we use the Buddha. So we tend to think, oh, well, Buddha's purifying me. No, Buddha doesn't purify you. You purify yourself. This practice we refer to. Okay, what time is it? How are we going? I've got such anxiety to say all these things in the time we've been allotted, and I'm running out of time or something.
We have 1 more hour.
Oh, only been half an hour. Can't be right. I've been a whole hour.
4 to 5.
I've got another whole hour, have I?
Yes, 3 to 5 is the.
It's 2 hours today.
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Well, first I have to stop. I have to relax. Phew. Please ask me some questions, okay? I've said a lot of things. Ask me some questions. Come on. Please ask me some questions. And if we have to go a bit longer, we could do that if you wanted. So ask me some questions. Anybody, please. Anything at all. Where? Who? Who's that? Sweetheart, go talk to me.
What do you say about having a teenage daughter who does a lot of talking about other people?
Oh, darling, I know. I can't imagine having a teenage daughter. I mean, my baby wouldn't get to be teenage. I would have killed her already. So I'm glad she's got to being a teenager. Well, darling girl, I mean, what can you do? You know, I mean, it's the whole world. We're all uncontrolled, whether we're 90 or 19, you know. What can you do? No, you need the mic for the people to listen to you. It's helpful. Thank you. Yes, it's good. So, darling, I mean, well, I thought you just got to love her and drive her conversation to nice areas. I don't know. And
It's more about overhearing her.
more about what?
Overhearing her with her friends, and which sounds sort of typical.
I don't know, what can you do? I mean, what can you?
Intervene. I want her to just sort of develop as she develops. But
No, I
it's a
know.
little like.
I can't imagine. I don't know. I can't imagine. The thought of being a parent's too much for me. Maybe especially just down here. Because you know what's going on already. What can you do, darling? I mean, love her for who she is. And try and program, you know, give her as much education as possible, isn't it? What else can you do? I mean, what else can you do?
Thank you. I agree.
What else, people? Sheil, who's Sheil? Hello, Sheil, talk to me.
Hello, Venerable.
Talk to me.
My question is, once you purify like an action, do you have to keep purifying that action, or
I understand your question exactly. It's like you basically it's like you're trying to chop down a 10,000 foot oak tree. And every day what you're doing is chipping away a little bit at it. Okay? It takes a while, darling. Did you hear me?
yes, thank you.
That's the answer, babe. So just keep chipping away, weakening it, weakening it. Every time you do that, you weaken it. Have long-term view, okay?
Okay, but do you have to still keep every day saying the same purification for the same action, or is once enough?
Did you not hear what I said? You didn't hear what I said, darling. You're chipping away.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, if you think your mind goes back to beginningless time, you might, and you've had beginningless lifetimes. I know there's a mind-boggling view to us, and therefore you've got billions of seeds in your mind. You remember a few of today and a few of yesterday, but you've done them all a billion times. So you're trying to purify all of that. So go one step at a time. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank
Trying to
you.
speak to you, darling. Do you understand?
Yes,
Shield.
yes, thank
Thank
you.
you. But we haven't finished the process yet. We've got 3 more steps to go. Who else? Yes, go, darling. Go. You go then. Go, come on.
So, yeah, you're talking about guilt, and I always thought that guilt is like a very Christian concept.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, I'm an atheist, I don't think I've ever felt guilt. I don't know what.
Tell me what you think guilt, to speak guilt out. What would it say if you had it? Say the words, because they're all concepts. What would guilt sound like?
That I broke some rules.
Sorry, what, darling?
That I've broken some rules that I'm not supposed to break, or something like that.
You don't feel that.
No.
So you don't mind what people think of you. You never worry what the world thinks of you. You're not trying to. So you have no concept of being a naughty boy or a good boy.
No.
What do you have then? What drives you to be a good person or not a good person? What's the thought process you go through?
I'm not sure, like,
Well, you better look into your mind and find out.
I'm-
I mean, what
No,
drives,
but like,
Uh-huh.
I really never felt, well, I've made mistakes.
okay, good. So what do you mean by that? So discuss it. Good. I mean, we're all human. So give me an example.
Bad financial decisions.
What, darling? No, forget those. Don't worry about those. What about hurting other people? Think of hurting other people. You never hurt anybody else? Have you never hurt anyone else? I beg your pardon?
Not on purpose.
Since you're born, you have never consciously ever done any action ever that's harmed another person. Well, you must be a saint, so you can pass the microphone on. You must, you sound like it. No, come on, please. So you've
I'm
never
just
lied,
stepping
you've
on-
never stolen, you've never said a bad word, you've never had an angry thought about anybody ever in your life since you're born. Never. You only have harmonious relationships with anybody you ever meet. Kind, loving, compassionate, generous. Whoever you meet ever, when you think of Mr. Trump, you think he's a lovely human being and you love him and respect him. You never have a single bad word. Are we communicating here?
Not really.
Not
No,
really.
it's
So you
not-
only have positive thoughts. You're only ever generous, happy, joyful, radiant, blissful, compassionate, kind, never have a negative thought. I'm really serious in what I'm
like
asking you.
to try and purposefully harm somebody.
Did you hear? I've said more than that, haven't I? I see you have a mala. What are you doing being a Buddhist? If you're so perfect, why are you being? I'm not being sarcastic.
I'm not a Buddhist.
Well, God, what are you going to mala on your wrist for? It's like the jewelry.
Well, I'm a yogi, so
A who?
I'm more into like Shaivite Tantra, so it's.
A who? Which one? What?
Shaivite Tantra,
What's the first word?
Shaivite, so.
I don't know what it means. So what are you doing in that? Is it helping you become a better person, or you don't need to become a better person? You seem to be never harming anybody.
Shiva is the,
What dear?
Shiva.
Huh?
Lord Shiva,
Shiva. What about Shiva?
the Lord of Death. and
Okay, go on. What about him?
Well, the reason I'm interested in Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah,
is
tell me.
because it's connected to Shaivite Tantra in many ways. So
Uh-huh.
it's, like Shaivite Tantra didn't survive as a religion.
Is what, darling?
Shaivite Tantra did not survive as a religion,
Okay,
but elements of this survive in Tibetan Buddhism.
right.
Tibetan Buddhism.
So you want to learn Tantra. Good. Okay, wonderful.
Yes, and,
Have you found yourself a
like,
tantric?
The Christian alternative would be a Rastafarianism. It's like-
I see, okay.
I'm not kidding.
Anyway, so go on. So what's your, so back to your question. So back to your question. So if you talk about guilt, so fine. So what's the question?
That's my question. So describe guilt to me, I guess.
So then I'm very happy for you. That's it. Nothing more to say to you.
All right.
If you've never,
That's
so,
the
but did you
question.
answer my question about never had a negative thought? Never done a negative thing to harm
Well,
any
that
living
would be
being
my-
in the universe?
That would be my other question.
What's that?
You're using the words negative. and
Yeah,
positive
that's right.
a lot.
That's right, exactly, because it's this is Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, yeah.
Yeah, and
What's your question about it?
Well, and the way you define it
Yes,
is whether or not it's intentionally hurting another being, right? If you're hurting.
no,
intentionally
I
hurting
didn't,
another
no,
being,
no, I was discussing the theories about what an action, what a positive or negative state of mind or thought is. As to whether you do that intentionally, that's another discussion, but you have a problem with negative and positive in the first place. So you would not agree that there's a type of act, you could list a list of actions that would be called negative, those that harm others, you can't think of, you couldn't list those theoretically. Killing, for example, what would you call that? Before you started, we're looking theoretically at a list of actions that could be called harmful to others. Would you agree that killing fits in there? What do you think?
well, yes,
Thank you. That's called a negative action. And then we would agree there's an action called generosity that benefits others. We could list that under the heading positive. Would you agree with that?
well, but I also would state that sometimes killing is necessary.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm not discussing that. We've got to start with deciding what is a weed and what is a herb. You've got to start putting them in the right category. And then if you're a very clever gardener, you can even learn to use weeds. I agree. But we're starting with the basic description of what is a weed and what is a herb. And so here we're discussing the basic principles of the human mind, or the mind of everybody, and looking at the description of those states of mind. And there are some that are called negative and some are called positive. and some are called neutral. This is Buddhist analysis coming from the Hindus. So how would you describe them otherwise?
But that's extremely dualistic. Like,
Yes,
I mean,
we're describing the dualistic world and the conventional world. Exactly right. You start with that first, and then you get to the ultimate afterwards. So what's your question, sweetheart? What's your question?
At that point, you just confused me.
Well, then
I come from a non-dualistic
No,
tradition.
excuse me. Buddha's your best damn non-dualist on the universe. Don't worry about it. So one step at a time, sweetheart. I beg your pardon?
But you are being,
I beg your pardon? I can't hear you, sweetheart.
you are being dualist, like by saying negative and positive, and you need to make a decision.
That's right, exactly. I'm repeating Buddha's teachings to you. I'm just repeating Buddha's teachings. I'm not making them up.
Okay. No,
Okay.
All right, sorry for arguing.
I beg your pardon?
I apologize for arguing.
Oh, no, I like arguments. You can tell I really enjoy arguments. Thank you very much. But if you're interested in Tantra, in Buddhist Tantra, Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, you better start learning at the very beginning. All this stuff is part of it. You can't go anywhere near Tantra until you go through the first stages. So be ready to start at the beginning again, sweetie pie.
Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Next question.
Venerable
Where are you?
Sophia.
Good, Sophia, talk to me, sweetheart.
Happy New Year, Venerable.
Thank you, darling.
Good to see you. While I'm practicing the purification practice and making this a daily habit, I would love for your advice on also creating boundaries with people, family, that their words and actions tend to trigger and hurt me on a continuous basis. I know
That's
it's
right.
my past karma, and I have to work on purifying my past karma because
That's
it
right.
reflects back in how people treat me. At
That's
the
right.
same time, what is your advice on a day-to-day
But
basis?
sweetheart, so it's all, I mean, advice depends on how you live. Do you live in a house with other people?
Yes, with my
And
husband.
you live in a house with a husband or a wife or a child?
With my
or
husband and some cats.
husband and cats. So you have mothers and fathers who live distant or what?
Yes, parents are a few states away.
Okay, so then are you describing your husband then? Being
No,
blunt.
I'm just describing my parents.
But you said their ages, they're miles away. So where's the problem?
We're
Already you're distant
continuously,
from them.
we talk regularly on FaceTime.
And so you call them or they call you?
Both.
So you decide to call your mother and father, why, out of being kind or what? Or do you think they
Out
expect?
out of making sure they're all right and keeping.
Good. So what happens is they start sticking their nose in your life. Is that right? Like all parents. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and one of them tends to make promises they don't keep, and it triggers some childhood memories of the same. And
okay, so childhood memories. So then we're taking the Buddhist view here. One of the parents says they will do something, and then you expect it to happen, and then you get disappointed when it doesn't happen. Is that correct?
correct.
Well, don't worry about childhood memories, darling. That's called attachment. You've got to label the problem, not look at the past event. The problem in your mind, like everybody, precious girl, is that you have attachment, this bottomless pit of emotional hunger to get what you want. So when someone says they will do it, of course you'll be disappointed and upset when they don't. So the problem isn't your childhood memory. The problem isn't your parent. The problem is your attachment. That's the Buddhist analysis. I'm sure you've heard this before. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's the answer, being blunt. So work on your attachment, sweetheart. And that's what you have to purify too. This is very powerful. Do you understand me?
Okay. Yes, I do.
You hear the point. That's cutting to the chest.
Yes. It's me having expectations and
An expectation is attachment, darling.
It's
And it's the
attachment.
drive of all of our suffering. The Buddha and the Lord Buddha in his Four Noble Truths basically says all our suffering comes from attachment, which sounds so simple, but it's kind of profound, you know? So really learning to look at that. And that's exactly, I mean, there you are, you're talking like a Buddhist, but you quoted exactly the Buddha, the Western analysis, childhood memory, you know? We've all got childhood memory.
Yes.
Or the universe,
Yes.
you've got to look at your mind. Because if you suffer, it's because of your mind. So if
Right.
you realize this is the danger for you, then you have to keep a bit distant if you can't handle it. But if you can handle it, it's really good practice for you to remind yourself of what it is you're trying to practice. Do you understand me? So boundaries means you have to choose those boundaries. And if you can't cope with your mother or father, too much contact, because you get disappointed too quickly and you really can't handle it, you've got to put up those boundaries. Don't tell them to do something. You just don't call them that often. That's up to you to decide if you can't handle it. But if you can and use it as a basis for your practice, that's wonderful, if you can. Do you understand, darling?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
Sophia.
Thank you.
Someone else. Hello, yes. Microphone here, please, Sheila. Yes.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, I understood the comparison you made, regret versus guilt.
Yes.
But if you had regret and then just because you, let's say you said something that caused harm and then you, there are feelings of sadness and there's still guilt, maybe because
I
you
understand
didn't
that.
want to harm, like how do you work with the feelings?
I know,
Getting
I
stuck
understand,
in that
sweetheart. Of
regret?
course, it's like it's huge. So, I mean, this is a discussion we're just having with Sophia, and having begun to we haven't got time to discuss all that here, but that's this discussion here is learning to know what the problem in our mind is. So there's a whole mixture of things there. The key one, like I said just then for Sophia, attachment, Buddha would talk about attachment as a main source of our pain. The most obvious level of attachment is for the objects of the senses, you know, sex and drugs and rock and roll and blah, blah, blah. But the subtle level of attachment we're talking about here is attachment to being seen and heard by others and approved by others. It's the most primordial of our attachments. And it's the source of why she's suffering, and it's the source of why you're suffering. So on the one hand, you've got healthy recognition, you did say something wrong, and you really are sad about that. And that's good, that's virtuous, that's useful, that's really helpful for you and very healing. But it's mixed with the guilt, which is I'm a bad person, because you're afraid they'll reject you. We're basically terrified that they're going to stop liking us. Do you understand me? And that's because we're terrified of people not liking us, you know. Attachment is so primordial, we don't even notice it. That it's all the time we're adjusting our behavior to make sure that what we say and do is the person in front of us is responding nicely. And as soon as they don't, I mean, we might get hurt or angry, we have a panic attack. Basically, they're rejecting us, you know. So that's why we often misuse for the request for forgiveness. Like you want to hear that person say, it's all right, sweetheart, I still love you. And you go, oh, phew, I got off the hook, you know. So it can be nice to be forgiven. But the discussion we're having here is all about you purifying yourself, first of all. So this first one of regret, you own, in this first step, you would own that you said those words and try and just hear that. And the key first step is not to worry about the harm you've done to them yet, that comes second, but it's to try and see that you know you don't want the habit. You know you don't want that habit, right? You don't want that habit. You know you don't. So for your own sake, you try to own it for your sake. Try to isolate it because I'm sick of this suffering. Because we've all got uncontrolled thoughts, uncontrolled mind, uncontrolled words, sorry. And so I have to see the harm it does to you first. Try and own that part. And then you think, well, whom can I turn to? So we have this second step is this practice of we rely upon the Buddha as our doctor. But the second part of this second step is where you now have compassion for the person you've harmed. Do you understand? You think I must purify for their sake as well. So you've got to isolate those two, first for your sake, then for their sake. That comes second. Do you get my point? It's really healthy, really, really healthy. And this is the point, if you really can heal yourself and know that you're sick of this habit, then you might go, then it's marvelous to go and ask them to forgive you. But what if they don't forgive you? That's where it's horrible. What if the person doesn't forgive you? Then our tendency would be to think, oh, well, I'm a bad person. No, you heal yourself. Even if no one forgives you, you can still heal yourself because you're in charge. You understand what I'm saying? So try and isolate the point of the harm it does to you. Then the second step is compassion for the person you harmed. Do you understand? That's very healthy, you know. Thank you. Yes, sweetheart.
How do you discern before making an action?
How do you discern what?
Like before making an action, how do you discern if that
Is good or bad?
other people or not?
Oh, darling, okay, yeah.
I'm gonna make a live example. I have
Yeah,
some
do, good.
comments with
Yeah,
that gentleman over
Yes,
there.
go on then, go.
I just have two questions. The first is,
No, talk to him, talk to me.
yes, first when he said, the mic is on him, is nervous. And he doesn't care about how other people think.
About him, right, sure. That's
So
fine.
you wouldn't
Yeah.
say that, that's
Yeah.
first. And second is, he intentionally asked a question, create some kind of level of stress in a Sangha.
So I'm
which-
really confused what you're going there. What are you
No,
talking about?
I'm just saying like, for me, it's an action of potentially harmful to other people.
I'm completely lost. totally, completely
Yeah.
lost. What
No,
are
no,
you
no,
saying?
just example.
Well,
right?
maybe don't, I'm confused by that. Can you keep it? I don't know what you mean by that. So forget that.
Yeah.
Use another example in your own daily life. Just a simple example.
No, just example is here because I have to comment on them, that I don't know if that count as CERN, if that action is helpful.
Which action
or
of whose?
harmful.
His action or my action?
My action of commenting on him,
What do you mean by commenting on him?
because.
Are you
I-
making a judgment to him or on me
Yes,
or
I'm
who?
making a judgment.
So you're
on him.
criticizing him.
Yes, oh,
So-
not criticizing, but
Okay, wait,
raising
listen.
question.
Okay. No. So I'm really quite confused now. So you're saying some words now,
Mhm.
and those words are, what are those words again? Say those words. What are these words you've decided to say?
Decide to say, okay, so I'm gonna talk to him, is that okay?
No, I don't want that to happen. It's just too
Okay.
completely confusing.
Okay,
We're discussing, forget him.
okay,
Forget whether he is the thing that is triggered, but you're describing that you're having.
how do you discern?
How do you decide?
Like your action would be helpful or harmful?
So you're saying words to me.
Yeah,
You have to decide, okay, you have to decide, first of all, you have to decide in your mind, your motivation for saying it. So let's say I'm your sister. Let's say I'm your sister and you want to speak, you want to find fault in something I'm doing. Is that correct? Is that the idea here? You want to point out something that I'm doing. You don't want to point out to me that I'm doing something wrong. Is that what you're suggesting? Because if it's like you want to praise me, Robina, that was such a good thing you did, then go for it. It's wonderful. You're showing you love me and you're respecting me and you praise me. But if you want to find fault, because there's only two options, praise me or find fault. So you're asking if you have decided to point out something to me that I've done wrong, you're trying to work out when should I decide if that's good or bad. That's what you're saying.
so is there only two options?
Give me another option, dear. What's another one?
Perhaps a question?
Well, that's different. Ask a question then. What's your question? What's wrong with the question?
Well, I mean, you're saying like, I'm either criticizing. or-
Either you're going to find fault with somebody or you're going to praise them. What other option is there?
But would there be another option of conversing or like?
About what?
questioning?
About what? About what? Give me an example. Give an example, John. Don't be so theoretical. Please bring it on the earth. Please bring it on the earth. Keep it simple. I'm your sister and you want to have a conversation with me, okay? What do you want to talk about to me? What's the top of your conversation you'd like to talk to me? Discuss it. What would you like to talk to me about? The lunch we had? Let's say the lunch we had. So either you're going to praise my lunch and thank me for it, or you're going to criticize my lunch. And so what other options might be, you ask me how I cooked the lunch. That's perfectly reasonable. That's a very nice thing to do, have a conversation. What's wrong with that? Are you understanding? Sunny,
No, no,
Sunny,
I
please back
understand.
off. Are we communicating?
Yes, yes.
So with him, you're wanting to find fault, basically, and you're sounding sneaky about it. Well, how about
I feel regret.
So
I like the word remorse more. I
and
feel
there you go,
remorse.
whichever word you prefer. So but you got, so the real one is, so I think we're communicating, okay?
But you can't, are you saying you can't criticize other people?
What, it's not about a question of can't, there's no one bossing you. You can do what you damn well like. It's a question of what's driving you to do it. Is your motivation something positive for that person? Or is it just you trying to, snucky in, like we all say, oh, it's just conversation. We're just being mean. You've got to look at why you want to say something. We've got to decide, So the first thing is, if it's going to be criticism, you've got to see what that's doing to you. That's the first step. And then second, if you think it is useful to the other person, you've got to have a confidence that they're wanting to hear it. Because 90% of the time we run around giving opinions, but no one wants to hear it.
The confidence.
Well, if you don't have confidence, shut your mouth. If you're not sure the cars are going to come around the corner and knock you over, don't cross the road. And if we work like this, we would never harm anybody. We'd have blur, with a sweet smile. We're so wicked. Pass the microphone on.
Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Who else? What a funny day today. Most of it. Who else?
Something might be there.
It's all your fault. So go on, who else has got questions?
I have a question.
Who's I? There, sweetheart, hello.
How do I know if something is positive or negative when I'm doing it?
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's sort of like it's you're asking me, you've decided to learn botany. Well, how are you asking me, how do I learn to distinguish between a weed and a herb? What would be your answer? What would you have to do to do that? What would you have to do that?
I guess like learn how to look at it.
Learn botany. You learn the rules of botany, don't you? You go to a botany school and learn. Do you understand me? Why are you looking puzzled?
No, I'm just thinking like,
Sweetheart, listen, I'm discussing here the Buddhist model of the mind. It's a particular way of describing the mind. The words are very familiar, love, hate, positive, negative, but I'm describing a very specific way of presenting the mind. And you asked a very specific question, which is a great question. Well, how do I distinguish between positive and negative? Well, then you'd need to study a little bit the Buddhist view, just like you would have to want to distinguish between a weed and a herb. You have to study botany. But you look in your mind. Okay.
so is it about like how it affects me more than anyone else?
No, I'd say it's both. But the very first one is it's harder. The first one is the main one. The first one is the first one, which is to recognize, I mean, similar to her point, how it's making you feel. Now, I think if we're slightly agitated, so if you're finding fault with a person, that means your mind's agitated. You don't like what they're doing. So then that should be the wake-up call to think, well, I better be careful. What's going on in my mind? And it's probably called anger. Very mild anger, very subtle anger, but it's probably called anger, which is distressing. It's kind of, it makes you sort of agitated. Would you agree with that concept? If you're feeling kind towards a person, your mind's not agitated, is it? Do you understand me? So one of the key qualities of these unhappy states of mind is they make us agitated. Attachment, anger, jealousy, we all know that. They're extremely painful. So that's why learning to become very familiar with our mind, which is really what meditation is about, where you really learn to know your own mind well. You can catch all these things before they start coming out the mouth and you hurt people. You understand? That's the skill. That's why we learn to meditate, Do you understand?
Yeah, I think I understand more now.
What, sweetheart? You understand a little bit what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You've got to know your own mind. And that's the key job, the key expertise of the Buddhist approach.
It's more about like the intention.
Well, the intention is part of it. I mean, you can mean well, but if you don't have any wisdom, like if you can mean well in giving someone advice, but if you end up hurting them because you just didn't realize that, it's not enough to be compassionate. You've got to be wise as well. Do you understand? We have to learn. It takes time. But starting with knowing your own mind is really important. And I think we just don't do that. Since we're born, we're just focusing on the outside world all the time, focusing on what they do and what they think and what they say. And then we're trying to make people happy and say the things we think they want us to say. We're not really conscious of what's happening in our own head, It's very powerful to learn that and feel more in control of what we're thinking and saying and doing. That's the key. Do you understand?
I think so.
It's possible. Good job. Thank you. Who else? Hello, who's that? Isla. Hello, sweetheart. Isla's in Scotland. Tell us your question, Isla.
So I'm dealing with massive attachment about the situation. And I'm sorry. And
Isla's going to cry. Sweetheart.
It's causing
darling,
me a lot
what's
of
going
pain,
on?
and it's the aversion, and I know I can see it and I know what it is, but I can't leave because the pain it would cause 3 other people. That's 3 people and I'm one, and that's not fair on them. So I have to stay, but it's trying to figure out how to set boundaries, and Sophia's question was great.
Try to do what, sweetheart? To set your what?
How to set boundaries, because if I don't distance myself emotionally, I can't cope. But if I do that, it's going to hurt them to some degree as well. So no matter what
I understand, but I think
people are going to get hurt.
no, Isla, sweetheart, I think you're setting too high a bar, too perfectionist a bar for yourself, darling. You're bound to fail if you think this way. Sweetie pie, you made a decision to stay in this environment, okay? This is pretty good. So be a little bit more humble with yourself. Be a little bit more relaxed with yourself. Don't try to be so perfectionist, because it'll just destroy you, sweetheart. I mean, it's already your compassion is the reason you're going to stay. This is incredible. And of
But
course,
how
there's
do I
attachment
cope
there.
with the aversion? It's too severe, especially because I get triggered so often because the aversion just isn't happy with this and isn't happy with that, and I'm trying to work with it, and I
Well,
just
I mean,
get
to
in
be
this.
really, well, sweetheart, to be blunt then, you can't have both ways. If you're saying that being in the situation is so painful that you can't handle your own mind, and then you're saying at the same time, there's no way you can leave it. You can't have both.
What do I do though? I don't want to hurt a bunch of people because 3 people
Well,
and one
Isla, that's
person-
part of the, I think part of the problem is, you know, thinking that you will hurt them. Maybe whenever it's true, whatever action we do will have an impact on others. But if you really do think it is the most beneficial with the long term in mind, then, you know, you need to be prepared to know that they might be hurt, but give them the responsibility of being grown-ups and to work. You know, your job is not to make everyone happy. Your job is the wish to make people happy, but you cannot guarantee that what you will say or do will make people happy. You've got to give them the respect to deal with their own results. If you really do feel you have to leave, if you really do feel that it's the right thing for the long term for your life, and to allow them the respect of dealing with their hurt.
Do I not have to make the decision based on what's better for the 3 people?
I can't hear you, darling. Say it again.
Do I not have to make the decision based on what's better for the 3 people?
Okay, sweetheart, if you are capable of that, then you're a bodhisattva. Then go for it, sweetheart. Go for it.
Trying.
If you can, it will not be it'll only make you happy. It'll only make you happy, sweetheart. But if you're not capable of that, then you have to, if you're really not, but I think you're undermining yourself. I think you are capable.
So then I have to distance myself, and that's the
No,
lesser
no, you
of the
don't.
2.
No, you don't. You don't have to distance yourself. No, you do not have to do that. You learn to eat the shit.
And just know that I'm going to get really upset, and that's going to upset
Well,
everybody.
you don't get upset. You grow up and stop getting upset. You're a big girl.
Yeah,
You
so
learn
how to
you
do
learn to
that with
change
the
the way
aversion?
you learn to change the way you're interpreting this thing that you say triggers your anger. Learn to see it as good. It has no intrinsic nature, sweetheart. Learn to see it as empty. If you're that together and you do decide for the sake of other people to stick around, then you change the aversion. You greet the thing. Aversion is just a panic attack when it meets what attachment doesn't like. So kindly eat it up for fucking breakfast, Isla. You're a big girl. I know you. You can do it. Change the way you label it. See it as having no intrinsic nature. See it as empty. You can do it easily, petal. Then you get the best of both worlds. All right? That's my opinion. We can talk about it later if you want to. Give it a go.
Robina,
Well, who's that?
Venerable Robina.
Who is it?
It's Georgia. Yeah.
Hello, sweetheart.
just-
Talk to me, Georgia.
I just wanted to say to the young woman that was asking you about her situation, I left a 30-year relationship that turned abusive and toxic, and that was affecting my practice to the point where I was letting my practice lapse. And I finally made the decision that even though it would be probably hurtful to my partner of 30 years, in the long run, it was more hurtful to me to stay. And
Well done, Georgia. That's good, darling. Well done.
so leaving isn't always the worst thing that you can do for other people. It's actually been the best thing for both of us.
That's true. But, you know, but the different people, I mean, it's true. What you're saying is very brave. But other people, if you can learn to turn it around and not have aversion, that's also a very powerful practice. We have to know what we're capable of, isn't it?
Yes.
That's right.
And I knew I wasn't capable of staying in that
That's right,
abusive
Georgia.
relationship. I couldn't
darling.
do it.
I understand, sweetie. I understand, Jordan. Thank you so much, darling.
Thank you.
Yeah, so go on. What else is there? Who else is there? Someone here? Nobody? Huh?
Hi.
Yes, Cassia, darlings, talk to me.
So my question is about how much we push ourselves.
A bit louder, sweetheart.
How much we push
In the
ourselves and not.
Oh, who's talking? Oh, hi, I think it's Cassia. I couldn't hear, it was still weird from the computer. Talk to me. Go.
My question is about setting vows appropriately based on our capacity.
What was those first words? Setting?
Setting our vows
Vows.
appropriately. Yeah, setting, let's just say goals for ourselves.
Okay, goals.
standards,
Good, yes.
Standards, anything
Good, yeah,
that are appropriate for our capacity.
yes,
And I tend to be very ambitious and what I
Yes.
think I can accomplish and do, and
Yes.
constantly find out that my body is not willing to do
Yes.
what my mind thinks.
yes.
So how do we constantly reevaluate and
I hear it.
Set
I know, I
this-
hear you, darling. I hear you. It's exactly the same, you know, it's the same process that you'd use if you're playing tennis or anything. You have to be realistic about where you're going. On the one hand, be optimistic and nothing wrong with pushing. I mean, I think especially when it comes to sports and things, everybody admires, what's his name, that Spanish guy? What's his name who's retired recently? That tennis player. Huh? Nadal, you follow, the tennis guy. He's famous for the fanaticism of his pushing, every bone of his body, and nobody criticizes him, because people are blown out by his courage. But I think when it comes to emotional stuff, we're a bit fragile, and we would be accused of being fanatic and ridiculous if we push ourselves and live in a difficult situation. We think we're being ridiculous, but if you've got the courage, I mean, perseverance and courage and patience in the face of obstacles, it can be the most potent practice. But you've got to know if he went too far, he would have broken his bones. So you've got to be, on the one hand, be optimistic, but at the same time, know the whole picture, where you've come from, how much you've achieved, and where you're going. You've got to have real wisdom, but at the same time, perseverance, So you've got to be humble at the same time. It can be arrogance that's false and really drives you in a wrong direction. So the more humble you can be, but also persevering and patient and realistic. It's a combination, darling. And we're going to fail because we're human, but you just you see it as all part of your practice, and you pick yourself up and you keep moving. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So nothing wrong with having big goals, but then when it's also incredibly tricky, because you see, one of the main functions of attachment, this deep primordial emotional hunger, this dissatisfaction, never happy no matter what we do, never satisfied. This is really dangerous because no matter how much we've achieved in our practice, we always think, I haven't achieved enough. I haven't gone enough. So that can be fanatic and really distressing. So you've got to be able to distinguish between optimism and the courage to keep picking yourself up, and learning at the same time to be truly delighted and satisfied with your progress. But attachment is never satisfied, always finding fault. So you've got to learn to know you're on the, sort of like for me, if you're learning music and you pass grade 1, you're delighted. You're so happy for yourself. You've done grade 1 instead of, oh, I'm only in grade 1. I'll be happy when I get to grade 2. And you'll get to grade 4,000 and you'll still not be happy. So you rejoice at grade 1 and then be eager to get to grade 2. It's a combination of pushing, but being really delighting in what you've achieved so far. That nourishes us tremendously. So add that, we miss that part. We're always pushing, but we forget the nourishing part. We forget the rejoicing. It's really important, sweetheart. Be delighted with how far you've gone and look forward to the next step. Do you understand? Then you've got the best of both worlds. Do you understand? Good one.
Venerable, I think we should do the practice because I'm looking at the time.
We are practicing, Sheila.
Oh, yeah.
We might not end up doing it, might we? We might not do it. We might come up necessary to do it. Maybe this is more beneficial. I don't know.
Venerable, there's someone on.
Good. Talk to me, sweetheart. Hello, dearest one. Hello, Julie. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Hello, dear Venerable. I have a question. I was reflecting today about a dilemma in my life about certain action because I'm in a financial difficult situation. And, I was reflecting about making a certain action that would maybe in terms of the society would be seen as not lying, but not saying everything that I earn in terms of money just to benefit my situation. And I'm not sure what is the right action. And I was just wondering if you'd have some guidance.
It's a bit too abstract for me. Do you want to be simple and just tell me what the situation is without giving yourself away?
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, okay, good. So I'm in the process of going to live at the Maitripa Rabjuma community with Maitripa.
I beg your pardon?
Rabjugma Maitripa community.
Oh, you're about to go to live there, yeah, then?
Yeah, in Oregon with
Yes, I do know exactly, yes, then.
okay, so I'm going there in April, and
Yes.
I've done a lot of work to make my finance in order, so not having any debt. And recently I've had a little bit of a health situation. And
Which
so
situation?
A health situation, just like I
Health?
couldn't first health.
Health? Oh, health. So go,
Yeah.
sweetheart, try and keep it simple. What's the
Yeah,
problem?
okay, so right, I will receive some financial help from the government because of my health situation. And so and I will also like receive other income from friends.
Sweetheart, what's the dilemma? What's the problem?
The dilemma is like if I don't say that I will help out people and earn some money, then I will.
don't understand your point. What do the community want you to do?
Well, nothing. That the main point of that is like I need to have no debt in my life right now. That's the
Okay,
only.
so they want you, if you're going to join that community, you must have no debt. Is that what you're
yeah.
So
And
what's the problem?
The problem is I've had a little bit of health situation recently, and I will receive help from the government.
What's that got to do with having debt?
It's because then, like, if I work, then I will not receive the help.
Why do you mean you have to work? Who says you have to work?
Just because I will do home care for a friend who need help. Just that.
What, sweetheart? I'm really confused.
Okay, it's really.
Who is asking you to work?
I'm just gonna do some home care to help from a friend who is sick. And
okay, so what you're telling me is you're going to have to get help from the government for your health problem. But then you say you're going to do work, but you're not going to declare the income. Is that what you're saying?
That's my question is like, I'm not sure what is the right thing to do.
So that's what you're saying. You want to do work, but you put the money under the table and not declare it. Is that what you're telling me? Is that against the law?
Yeah,
you're lying and stealing, so you don't want to do it. Very simple.
Okay, but I was just saying, like, I was just questioning it because it's a friend, and I know that the money I want to earn is to support my practice and make sure.
Sweetheart.
Yeah.
Come down to earth.
Okay.
You asked a very straightforward question. Yeah. You said, one, you're going to receive government help for your health, and that's contingent upon you not having income. 2, you said someone's going to pay you to do a job, and that's called income. Based on what you just said, well, that sounds to me like you're lying and you're stealing. So is that not true? Is that what you've just told me, right?
No, but that's in the future. It's not happening. I was
then what are you worried about then?
I was having a reflection. I wanted to have your guidance and you helped me, and so I'm really grateful.
Sweetheart.
So it's good. Everything is
Sweetheart, please wait.
Yeah.
So you're going to go to live among the nuns. I'm very happy for you. Number 1. Number 2, you got a health problem and the government will help you. I'm very happy for you. And number 3, you're not working for anybody yet. Is that true?
Yes.
Well, then relax and enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay. One step at a time, Petal.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you. Thank you. I mean it.
Who else has got a question? Come on. No questions? Well, listen, then I think we can, okay. I mean, it shows all the questions. It really shows the question here, the question here, the question here, your question. It really shows. It's difficult to know our mind. Our mind like this soup. You know, with all the sort of the soup with all the veggies all mixed around. And they're not just mixed around, they're pureed soup. You cannot tell one bit from another. This is our problem. And our problem in our culture is because from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to bed, we don't pay attention to our mind, which is why, as Lama Zopa says, the vast majority of humans on the planet don't know that what goes on in the mind plays any role at all. So we just start seeing that what goes on in our mind plays a role, 1, and then 2, beginning to see what is going on is a pretty tremendous job, you know. So here we're using Buddha's view. Here we're using Buddha's view. The best non-dualistic you're going to bloody find, including Mr. Shiva. He outdid Mr. Shiva, I promise. Just to be... That's why he diverged in his own direction. He says, though, you dudes didn't get enough, you're still stuck on the non-duality. He went further. Now I'm being provocative. Okay,
That's
You-
up to.
it's up to you to find out. It's up to you to find out. I might be speaking garbage or I might not. And if you want a Tibetan tantric teacher, honey child, you're in for a really tough job. So go searching and be serious about it. But you got to start where I'm talking, right here with conventional reality, which is by definition dualistic. And then only when you know the dualistic world can you get to the non-dual. Okay, baby, it's a step-by-step thing. No discussion.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. He's refraining from discussing it. So may you find your teacher. Please look, start with the Dalai Lama. He's the best one you're going to find. But whether you're going to get to see him, what do you mean? What does that mean? What does that mean?
I did not like his attitude towards.
Oh, here we go. Okay. You talk about dualistic. You are the grossest, most dualistic person. You can say that about a Buddha. It shows you're as thick as it shows you're as thick as a post, as we'd say in Australia. And as mad as a hatter, we'd also say in Australia. Or as mad, no, we'd say as mad as a snake.
Ooh.
What's your name?
Sergey.
Who?
Serge.
Keep it simple. Serge, you're Russian or something, are you?
Russian born, Ukrainian, Israeli.
Wow, what a mixture. Wow. I know all of those three. I've been in Russia. I haven't been in Ukraine. I've been to Israel and Russia. They're very similar. And they all like me there because they say I'm just like them. So you should be very familiar with me. Okay. I can't believe Russian Israeli is bad enough. Wow. I thought the Ukrainian people puts in there.
Where are the people killed?
What?
Where are the people killed?
Where people kill people. It's true, we do. I know in Moscow, the traffic was so intense and the people didn't just put their fist out of the car, they put their entire upper body out of the car to curse at you, It's very fascinating. I like Moscow. I really like the Russians.
Oh,
Okay, let's do a bit of purification, shall we? We'll do it very casually and very easygoing. You won't even notice the difference. I'll talk just like I'm talking now. I won't suddenly have a meditation voice, I promise, So just close your eyes and sit up straight and just check your body. Because there is a position that's conducive to when you're being more internal. And coming from the great yogis in the past, there's about 8 different points. So if you can be in the full lotus position, it is wonderful. Because then, each step on the other side, then all the subtler energies are nicely aligned and your subtle mind and subtle wind energies can kind of go very smoothly. And you can sit like that for months when you're a great yogi or yogini. And if you can't, that's fine. Have one leg on the other one. If you can't do that, have regular cross-legged. And if not, that's sitting in a chair, like most of us. So if you're in a chair, the key point is don't slump into the back of the chair. Put your feet on the ground firmly and sit up straight. Hold up your own body. This is important. That's for this 5-10 minute little meditation we're going to do. That's the first point, your legs and your back. Then your hands can be in the meditation gesture or mudra, here like this, if you can see. This is a classic position we're taught. There's many variations, left underneath, right on top, 2 thumbs touching. I've heard there's some kind of subtle channels related to bodhicitta at the tips of your thumbs, so there's something auspicious about the thumbs touching. Then your shoulders are square but relaxed. So your legs, your back, upright but relaxed. Shoulders are upright but relaxed. Head slightly, now the head slightly tilted forward, chin tucked in. Your lips slightly apart, tip of the tongue resting behind the top teeth, breathing through your nose. And then your eyes looking down, looking as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground, A little bit of light coming in because that keeps your mind sharp. And then settle into this position because this is just the body. The body needs to be in a conducive position, but the body doesn't meditate. The mind does. So now we'll just do this little contemplation. I'm going to say words and you're just going to contemplate, okay? Stay focused. And we're going to do these 4 little steps. The first is regret. So this healthy attitude of acknowledging anything we might have done recently that we can remember, or this life, perhaps some actions with our body and speech that have harmed others. Just recall a couple if you like, remember them. Say them to yourself. Perhaps lying, perhaps stealing, perhaps killing, bad mouthing, things with your body and your speech. Just acknowledging you did do it. I did do it. You're talking to yourself. And then, of course, you think because your mind's been existing since you were born, then there's millions of things we must have said and done and thought, or said and done, that we don't remember. So it's fairly certain, given that we're not holy beings yet, we've done some things to harm others, even, so we think, well, you know what, Robina, you talk to yourself, I regret having done those things out of ignorance because they've left seeds in my mind, they've left imprints in my mind, they've left the habit in my mind, and I don't want that. I don't want future suffering. I'm sick of suffering. I don't want that. And then if you can have the idea that your mind goes back and back and back, you mean animals countless lives, humans countless lives, must have done countless things, sowed countless seeds in our mind that we're carrying with us, that are sitting there latent, waiting to ripen as our suffering. We don't want that. There's no way. So we think, I regret anything I've done since beginningless time with my body and my speech that have ever harmed others. I regret from the depths of my heart because you know what? I don't want the future suffering because I'm sick of suffering. I'm fed up with suffering. I don't want suffering. So I regret from the depths of my heart. So whom can I turn to? Whose methods can I use to purify myself? To put atomic bombs under these tendencies so I can transform my mind into the mind of a holy being, a Buddha, develop its marvelous potential. Well, we turn to the Buddha here. He's our doctor, if you like. So we can visualize above our head Lord Buddha, not in the sutra form, but in the tantric form, the form of the Bodhisattva, radiant light body, white light body, sitting in multicolored, on a multicolored lotus in full lotus position, radiant white light body, holding a bell in his left hand, which symbolizes wisdom, and a dorji in his right hand, symbolizing method, the union of the two truths, the union of the two dualities and becoming non-dual. Everything's radiantly beautiful, and is a manifestation of this non-duality, our own marvelous potential. And if we have a spiritual teacher, a guru, a lama, then we think it's their mind manifesting as this Buddha for my benefit, solely for my benefit. And you visualize he's sitting above our crown, facing the same way as us, this radiant white light body, the embodiment of perfection, the embodiment of non-duality, and the embodiment of my potential, showing me what I can become. We rely upon him. We're using his methods, the methods he used to become what he is, so we can become the same. How amazing, how fortunate. So the second part of the second step of reliance, we now think of those we rely upon, as they say, all the suffering sentient beings. So all the countless beings since beginningless time that we have harmed. When we were animal, think of the creatures we ate, think of the creatures we harmed out of our fear. Countless beings we must have contacted and harmed with our body and speech. So we have compassion for them now. We must purify for their sake. Regret is for our sake, and this is for now for their sake. I must purify for the sake of all these suffering sentient beings. And if we can, have compassion for those who've harmed us. Why? Because they will suffer in the future. And we don't want them to suffer. So we must purify for the sake of all suffering sentient beings. So the third step, we'll keep it very simple and just do three mantras. We'll do 3 visualizations and 3 mantras each time. The mantra will be on the screen if you want it. Otherwise, just listen and meditate, listen and visualize. So basically, we imagine Guru Vajrasattva so compassionately sends powerful, like hose of energy, a hose of liquid nectar that like forcefully enters our crown and fills us completely. And imagine what it does is drive out through the lower parts of our body all the imprints of all the harm we've ever done with our body since beginningless time, as like filthy liquid. It drives it out forcefully, disappearing into space, not one atom left, as we recite the mantra 3 times. You just listen to it and contemplate and visualize, imagine this happening. And imagine, even though we're using the Buddha, it is our mind doing it, our mind purifying. Our mind, as Yeshe says, creates negativity. So we purify it by creating positivity with our mind. It's the antidote. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Suto Shayo Mebawa Supo Shayo Mebawa Anurato Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajramami Mutsa Vajrabha Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Suto Shayo Mebawa Supo Shayo Mebawa Anorakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mitsa Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Suto Shayo Mebawa Supo Shayo Mebawa Anorakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mutsa Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. So delighted, totally full of this nectar, totally purified. How amazing. All the actions of our body. And now our speech. Visualize this time, Guru Vajrasattva very compassionately sends this powerful hose of liquid energy through our crown, filling us completely. And this time driving up through the top to the top of our body, all the imprints of all the harm we've ever done with our speech, which of course is us clever humans, you know. I mean, animals make a few grunting sounds and a few things, but we're the clever ones with our speech. So much harm, you know, the lying, even all the speculating, thinking we're speaking the truth and we're not. All the harmful speech. Criticizing, finding fault, rabbiting on about nothing, all the useless speech, all the the talking bad things behind backs, all this harmful speech that harms us and harms others. Imagine all this is purified, all this nectar, forcing it up through the top, leaving through the top parts of our body like filthy liquid, disappearing into space. Just as Lama Yeshe says, when you turn on a tap in the sink, all the junk in the glass comes to the surface, doesn't it? Visualize this way, delighting in doing this as we say the mantra. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudo Shayo Mebawa Subo Shayo Mebawa Anorakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mutsa Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudo Shayo Mebawa Supo Shayo Mebawa Anorakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mutsa Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudo Shayo Mebawa Supo Shayo Mebawa Anorakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Mutsa Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe. And then now imagine now all the negativity of all the nonsense from our ridiculous dualistic nonsense words gone like a dream, completely purified, full of this radiant nectar. How amazing. Not one atom left. So now the third time, we purify the mind, the source of it all the misconceptions, all the nonsense, all the final dualistic nonsense of an inherent me, an existent, truly existent, inherent, pathetic, ego-based, fear-based nonsense me that's separate from others, complete fabrication, complete nonsense. This root delusion, which gives rise to this powerful emotional hunger of attachment to get what that fantasy that fantasy self wants, and all the aversion and panic attack and anxiety when it doesn't get what it wants, and all the other dramas like arrogance and pride and low self-esteem and all the rest. All of this nonsense, all these fabrications, all this dualistic rubbish made up by our ridiculous minds that causes so much pain. Gone like a dream, eradicated. And this time, Guru Vajrasattva sends radiant beams of light that enter our crown like laser beams that instantaneously eradicate this nonsense from the mind. Just like as Lama Yeshe says, when you turn on a light in a room, the darkness is instantly dispelled. That's it, you know. Totally eradicated, this radiant light, blissful. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudochayo Mebawa Suboshayo Mebawa Anurakto Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Meprayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Nutsa Vajrabaha Mahasamaya Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudoshayo Mebawa Suboshayo Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarvasiddhi Meprayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Nutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Sama Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sudoshayo Mebawa Suboshayo Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarvasiddhi Meprayata Sarva Karma Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Nutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahum Pe. So now imagine we remove even the slightest, the subtlest imprints, even like the taste of this non-dual, all the non-duality nonsense, all the duality nonsense gone completely. Even just the taste of it gone. It's like doing a second rinse, just to clean out even the subtlest left, what's left over, even this, just do one more mantra and then visualize even that has all disappeared. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dina Mebawa Sudashaya Mebawa Subashaya Mebawa Anurakta Mebawa Sarvasiddhi Meprayata Savakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramami Nutsa Vajraba Mahasama Sattva Ahum Pe. So the fourth step, determination to change, resolve. So regret, reliance, the remedy, and now resolve. Decision, you know. So we've taken the layperson vows, and we've taken bodhisattva vows, and we've taken our tantric vows, whatever. Those we know we can keep. We say, I will never kill. We reiterate them. I will never steal. I will never lie. We program our mind with this powerful, you know, the commitment that the vows we've taken, the decision to refrain, that putting atomic bombs under these tendencies, you know, purifying them, make strong decision to keep those vows. And then those actions, and maybe we just contemplate for a moment our old rubbish habits, you know, bad mouthing our sister, uncontrolled, bad mouthing the next door neighbor, criticizing the politicians, whatever. The old habits, maybe we're lazy, maybe we can't be bothered, maybe we don't do our practice properly. Maybe just make a few decisions yourself, you know. I will decide I won't do that, or I will do this. Like a little bit chat, give a chat to yourself and make some decisions about your old habits. Because when we decide something is when we will do it. Pretty clear. I will. Everything exists on the tip of the wish, as Lama Zopa says. So make some decisions. Just for a brief time, 24 hours, I won't badmouth my husband. 5 minutes, I won't get angry. You know, 10 minutes, I won't be lazy. Just make some decisions, your old habits. So now we visualize Guru Vajrasattva dissolves into white light very happily, dissolving through our crown and completely filling us. And we imagine the energy of the Guru's body, speech, and mind, energy of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and my body, speech, and mind. They merge, becoming, as Lama Yeshe says, becoming union, oneness. Imagine this. Guru, Buddha, me, same, not dual. Perfectly enlightened, radiant, blissful, clear. So now imagine you expand to fill the universe. Vast, clear, radiant, blissful. No thoughts. Just for a couple of minutes. As big as the universe, limitless. No thoughts. So that's it. We just finished with the 4 immeasurable thoughts, these marvelous aspirations of the Bodhisattva, okay? So we come out of our space, we come back into our body, and we think we're going to be useful to sentient beings on our path. So we think how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment, ignorance, and anger. May they abide so. I will make this happen. This is the brave attitude of the Bodhisattva. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Vajrasattva, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May they be free. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Vajrasattva, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and its causes. And as Rinpoche says, also the happiness of enlightenment. May they have them. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Vajrasattva, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never parted from higher rebirths and liberations, excellent bliss. May they never be parted. I will make this happen. Please, Guru Vajrasattva, bless me to be able to do this. All right, let's have the dedication prayers at the end on the screen there. Couple of ones, just this little one here. So we just think these thoughts, okay? Due to these merits. So what that means is due to the positive karmic seed we planted in our mind from listening to these teachings, because everything we think and do and say sows seeds, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Gewadi Nudu Daglama Sangi Dribune Droa Chikyang Malupa De Sala Gurpa Shog. And now may the supreme jewel bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration, you know, to never give up, becoming a Buddha, so we can be of benefit to others. May that which has not arisen in the minds of others may it arise and grow, that which has arisen in the minds of others may it increase more and more. Jang Trov, Sem Trov, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam, Ke Gu Chi, Ke Pa Nyam Pa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gonju, Felba Shog. Go on, next one. More? Any more? That's it. Swift return prayer, please. So long life prayer response to Dalai Lama. May he live a long, long life. This great tantric yogi, this master of the universe, whom Sergei doesn't like because he says something naughty that Sergei doesn't agree with.
Psychoanalytical disagreement, sorry.
Okay. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, with the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. May all your holy wishes be spontaneously filled. And then Alama Zabaruche. Yeah. Two different dreams I can report to you. Latest research. He's our Lama Sergei, who died 18 months ago. So we're waiting for his reincarnation to come. We want him to come back. So we do this prayer every day for him to come back quickly, to carry on teaching us. And there's one dream. Kadra had a dream a year ago. This amazing female Lama that some of us know. She had a dream in which Rinpoche appeared to her and took her hand and said he was very happy where he was. And she said it was in the mountains somewhere, but she didn't recognize him. That's a year ago. Then 18 months ago, another person reported a dream in which this vivid dream was again in the mountains, and there's a valley, very beautiful, and this very short, I'm just summarizing it, this vivid recognition that Rinpoche was at that particular time had been reborn. So then I'm sure he's not wasting time. So I'm sure he's probably a little boy right now, probably a Nepali boy. It means he hasn't turned into an American or a girl. We can deduce that perhaps. And he's so we pray that he comes back quickly, because we have to correct the cords, depending on arising, you know. Where's the prayer? Here it is. So peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lozang father and sons, along with lineage masters, all the objects of refuge, infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accompanying this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, the explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single quality for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, and for a gateway for which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly depart to peace. Such a great loss. Nevertheless, for the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean, of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the children of the victorious ones, as a smile of a reincarnation, swiftly beaming glory for fortunate disciples. That'll do. Thank you so much. Okay, goodbye. Now there's cake.